have any that's available nearby you, check it out. Is there a bar that has it in cocktails? Definitely go order one and start the journey. It's the craziest thing that nobody's ever heard of. There's more shochu consumed in Japan every year than sake. It's
That was my
Japan's
question,
best
actually.
kept secret.
I did when I read that, I was like, really? Because I only know sake, and I was like, wow, no, that's pretty popular. It's more
It's
consumed,
huge.
and people should definitely check it out. This is Christopher. Welcome to this show, and I love your background. As you said, your office, so fun for people who are watching. They can see you being in your natural habitat. And welcome to the show.
It is my natural habitat. Thank you very much, Ani. It's a pleasure to be here.
As I told you before we hit recording, I was like, you have done so many things and you have achieved such heights in your profession that I was like, how am I going to ask this human being all the questions that I have in 30 minutes? But let's go with the flow. Let's start where I think it all began. You mentioned you in high school, you were interested in brewery, and that's when it all started. From US, you took all of that to Japan, where you live right now. Obviously such a huge journey, but can you shortly walk me through? You're in high school. As a high school Christopher, tell me, why was it interesting for you, brewery, and then tell me the journey from US to Japan.
Okay, I'll give you the executive summary of this timeline. Okay. I was in a US history class with a couple of friends. We were in a group. We had a project. We had to make a newspaper from like the 19-teens, really. And at that time, alcohol was illegal in America. So people were making alcohol at home. I found that fascinating. I guess I was probably 16. No, I was 14 at the time. And so my friend and I, Jesse and I, started, rather than doing the group project, we started researching how to make alcohol at home. Turns out it's not that hard. And the key point is to keep everything very clean. We can do that, we thought. So we assembled the components to create a quote unquote home brewery. And my parents, being rather religious, would leave home on Sundays. And so I would have access to the kitchen, and we started home brewing. And that was about a 2-year stint where at first it was terrible, but we got better and better and better. And I fell in love with it.
Okay, so it's for 2 years. Why do you stick with it? Was it like because you and your friend had something in common? Because 2 years isn't like 2 weeks. And
well, it became a business, sort of. It sort of became an illicit business. We were legally, we could make the alcohol, but legally we of course couldn't drink or sell it, and we were doing both. So I think the statute of limitations on that has lapsed, so I could talk about it freely now.
Like, can you talk about this? Because I don't want.
Well, hey, yeah, you come track me down in Tokyo, I guess. But I developed a very, very strong interest and passion for small batch handmade drinks. And when my parents eventually found out about homebrewing, they shut me down immediately. I was grounded like no son has ever been grounded in the history of never, ever. And I ended up going to the local microbrewery, Otter Creek in Middlebury, Vermont, and said, hey, I want to learn how to do this professionally. And so they let me in as an apprentice. And so I started apprenticing. And one crazy week, we lost 2 brewers in the same week. Our top brewer wrecked his back, couldn't lift bags of grain. And our second brewer left Vermont to join the circus, which happens, I suppose.
It was worked for you, but in a
very... It did. And I became a brewer. It was a crazy turn of events. I became the youngest brewer in America at the time, too young to legally drink what I was making. And that just turned me into a true beer nerd. I ended up graduating from college, like grad school. I end up in South Korea. There was Spain in there, South Korea for a couple of years, boy meets girl, follow a girl to Japan. She really wanted to live in Japan. And when I got to Japan, I ran face first into Japan's indigenous spirits, Shochu and Awamori. I very quickly realized, wait a second, these are the most diverse spirits I've ever seen in my life. They're like the craft beer of spirits. And I fell head over heels in love. And, fast forward another couple of decades and here we are, still in Japan, still loving it. Tokyo is home.
But how old are you when you leave US? And what mental state were you like, okay, I'm following this girl, I'm going to make it there, or you had no plans?
So Spain was while I was in university. So I guess I was in Spain from the age of 20 to 21. And I was there because I was studying Spanish literature was my major. And that just made a lot of sense. Now I think I have this something in my DNA. My parents both met when they were working abroad in the UK. a long time ago. So I think there's something baked into the software inside of my system that says, okay, you're supposed to go and do crazy, just explore. And I think that's what I've always felt the need to do. I got back to the US after a year in Spain, tried to settle into a life in the educational system in America, got fed up with it pretty quickly, was really frustrated and bailed, and got into the education system in South Korea. And that ended up being a crazy just circumstance where at that point I guess I would have been 23 years old, and
The education system as studying or teaching?
teaching. Yeah, I was teaching
And you're
in
teaching
South Korea. I was just teaching the English language at that point. And then
okay.
I moved in down the street from my future wife, it turned out. She befriended one of my colleagues at the school, a Japanese woman, and they became really close friends. And then the Japanese woman kind of played Cupid for us. My girlfriend at the time hated her job in finance and wanted to get out of that. So she's like, why don't we just go to Japan for a year and see how that works? I'm like, cool. I would love to see you outside of your comfort zone for once. So followed her to Tokyo. She went and studied the Japanese language, and I got another job in education at a university called Waseda starting in 2003. So I would have been 25 at that point.
Okay, so
And we planned to stay for a year. A year turned into 2 years. That turned into five. Five turned into a mortgage, and we're in our 23rd year now. And at one point, we were both professors at the same university. She's still there. I left a couple of years ago to move on to something bigger.
okay, so you then stumble upon this series and you're like, this is amazing. Why is no one talking about this more? And then how did the idea of the business, like how did you start the business in Japan? Because I can only imagine how hard it is to, not I can only imagine, but I used to live in the US and my ex-husband had a business there. It's hard to start a business in US, but then go to Japan, a language barrier, as I can imagine, and then cultural differences. When was the time that, how did you get the idea first? And then how was that you started business in completely different country?
The Japanese business, so I do have one in Japan, and there's a separate entity that's in New York. The Japanese entity is the older one, and I took a shortcut to getting into that business. I bought 33% of an existing business, and so there's three of us now that are co-owners of the business, and I sort of function as the kind of like the chief operating officer, if you will. It's the day-to-day, it's, organizing things, and sometimes functioning a little bit like a CEO, but we're too small to really care much about those titles. And that was, as you guessed, it's an amazing challenge doing business in Japan. Everything is very different from what you might be accustomed to in another part of the world. And it is certainly very different from the business that I co-manage in the United States, which we started on March 6th of 2020, which was amazing timing to give up a tenured professorship in Tokyo and just jump face first into
I
entrepreneurship.
don't know you that well, but whatever I've heard, it's your style.
Yeah, kind
What
of. Yeah, it is. Take the leap.
not
Yeah.
following the traditional road. As I hear you talk, you're like not a person who follows the traditional road. You are a very like creative person who, as I see you, feels guided to do something, you would do it, no matter what the environment might look like.
I think that's accurate. I will analyze the risk, but if the risk is not bigger than me, then I'm probably going to go for it. Yeah. Well, so the US business and the Japanese business really depend on each other. The US business happens to be our Japanese business's largest single customer. And the Japanese business spends most of its energy working with our suppliers across southern Japan. And that has just been a hell of an education in terms of learning how to build trust, to maintain trust, to just deal with all of the hurdles that get thrown in your way, to learn what no means and what it doesn't mean, and to eventually get what you need and get what you want without selling your soul and without pissing too many people off in the process.
So, I asked you already, you have teams in both countries, and there is
That's
a
right.
14-hour difference, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right now.
So,
Yep.
how does that work? If you have teams, then obviously you are based in Tokyo, and as I know, you travel a lot back and forth. How does
That's
it
right.
affect? Before we dive deep into the business side of it, you as a human, how does it affect your mental state? Because it must be crazy, I would use this word consciously.
That's accurate. It can be very crazy. Basically, the workday on the Japan side will start usually between 9:30 and 10:30 a.m. And we go until early afternoon, mid-afternoon, before people are basically off on their own, doing their own things, making sales calls, whatever it happens to be. And then we reconvene in the evening. So it's kind of a little bit of a short day for me anyway. Let's say 9:30 to 3:30 or 4:30. Then I have a bit of a break around dinner. And the US side of things will click on at 7:30 a.m. on the East Coast, on the US East Coast, which over here right now is 9:30 p.m. Sometimes with, daylight savings, it'll be 8:30 p.m. But they on the East Coast, they're very flexible, and they say, hey, you're going late, so we'll start early just to make it a little bit more sane. So they start at 7:30. The calls start then. It's back and forth. And then because I'm in the alcohol business, folks don't like to get up so early in terms of our customers over there. So often I'm staying up until 3 a.m., 4 a.m. over here to make sure that I'm able to call enough people every day. And then we close the books on that day, or I do personally go to bed usually before 5, hopefully, and then do it again. It's
Okay, so
kind of crazy.
I can see, I cannot imagine, because you, like, when you have not experienced something, you can only try to imagine. As I see it, so the business, as you said, is not like huge. So because of that, you are the one who's doing all of this. Have you thought about maybe hiring someone in the US to do that? Or is it that you have the trust of all these clients and you have to deal with this?
We have a small team in the US. I guess the total number there's 5 of us total. We do have an ambassador for our brand in New York City. And so we have technically have a national sales director. We have a logistics director. We've got all sorts of advisors, and we are trying to scale. We are in the process of figuring that out. But the game that we're in, is one of distributor management, and it's a very difficult game to play. It doesn't really matter that I'm over here as long as I can get on the phone. It's all relationship driven. And as a verified nerd in this space, I wrote a book about the topic back 10 years ago. And I've been used by the Japanese government as a ambassador of sorts for the spirits category. So it is helpful when it's me on the phone, or it is helpful when I'm in the States for me to make the visit.
Yeah,
as influential as the rest of our team are, sometimes it just helps when the founder gets on the phone. You know what I mean?
They want the big guy.
Sometimes they do, yeah.
So how do you set boundaries then? Because as I had in my podcast a lot of experts about burnout, no matter how much you love something, no matter how long have you been doing, if someone reaches the burnout, they might hate the job that they are doing, and their passion might turn into something that they hate. So have you ever had that moment when you're like, I'm done with this? You haven't achieved that yet? Or how are you even setting boundaries?
I'm very bad at setting boundaries personally. I've experienced low-grade burnout multiple times, and it's been a struggle for me to sort of figure out how to manage it. I absolutely wake up in the morning thinking how lucky I am to be able to have the opportunity to do what I'm doing. But at the same time, I've long been a very, very empathetic person. I mean, we know that educators can often be that way. It's kind of like nurses often have issues with this too. It's just really living other people's experiences, really taking them on. And I've long had a problem with that. And it really came a couple of times recently. I guess this year we sometimes bring groups of people over to experience the distilleries and the culture and the places where these drinks are made, because it really starts to click for people and it really changes their lives to experience it firsthand. But on one of the trips earlier this year, one of our guests, their mom passed away while the guest was on the tour. And this was a life-breaking moment, just for this person, this guest. And I just went straight into it with them. And I went as deep as they went. And I just did it automatically. It's just, so one of my business partners is like, well, this is kind of what you do, so I'm going to let you do it. But that really kind of was a moment where I was, I had other guests that we needed to be taken care of. Unfortunately, my team was there to do that, but I was really just living these really horrible moments with this one guest who had been affected. And then a couple months later, and this is still ongoing, one of my best friends ever was in a traffic accident and he got hit by a truck while he was on a bicycle. And
God.
I just, family came over the whole thing, and like I was just really a part of it. And I ended up getting dragged pretty far down by all of that. And it's happened before. And fortunately, I'm very, very lucky because my mother happens to be, she's a deacon in the Episcopal Church, and what she does with her time is she specializes in, and I don't know how she does this, she specializes in end of life.
Yeah.
She's the one who's in the hospital, just being there with people. So it's not a religious thing at all. It's more just presence and helping where she can help. And she's been really, I call her sometimes to talk about this when I'm really hitting the bottom and I'm starting to worry about myself a little bit. And she's like, you have to create a boundary. There's a boundary. I'm like, I don't know how. You're going to have to tell me how that works. And she said, there's a difference between the empathy as you understand it, which is to really try and feel what the other person is feeling, to live their experience as much as you can, and being there for them. There's a difference, and you have to figure out what that means for you. And I was like, I don't really know, but I'm sure you know, because you go and do this every week. You watch the family members of your friends from your community pass away right in front of you, and you see their pain. How do you not let that get inside you? And I can't remember how she explained it, but she said there's a very big difference, and you have to flip the switch between being in it or being there and acknowledging everything that's happening and being ready to help where you can help, but not living their pain.
Mm-hmm.
Now that sort of made sense to me, but I went and I read up on it, and there's actually names for this switch that you can throw. And the one that I was doing all the time was called emotional empathy, where you are living someone else's experiences to the best of your ability. And then you can throw a switch to the other side, which is what I believe nurses do. I believe it's what really successful teachers who don't get burnt out, like elementary school teachers, do. And it's the switch is thrown to empathic concern. So you go from emotional empathy to empathic concern. And empathic concern is where you are there, you are present, you are ready, but you're not allowing yourself, for the most part, to experience every single up and down of that emotional roller coaster ride. And so I think I started to apply that a little bit to my own experiences. And then, when employees, colleagues throughout the industry come with me or come and share things with me, I feel like I'm a half decent listener most of the time. And so I do get people confiding in me quite a bit. And I've started to realize that I need to give myself space to think about how these things are affecting me. How do I feel when I'm going through these things? And I never used to do that. It was always just focus on the person going through the hard time. And now I'm giving myself 15 minutes, 20 minutes afterwards to think about everything that happened and think about how it made me feel. And it's really been helpful in terms of figuring out what the triggers are and figuring out how to see them coming before they hit me, and being able to switch most of the time to empathic concern and really use my extreme emotional empathy only sparingly. And that's been very helpful both professionally and personally. And it's helped me to feel like I have better control over my own reactions to things, which has always been something that I've tried to get better at. I mean, you can't choose the stimuli, you can't affect that, but you can absolutely control how you react to it. And a lot of it is just giving yourself space to figure out how things make you feel. And sometimes, at least for me, I often forgot to do that part.
As a business owner, especially because I have had the same challenge, I have still not found the way. It's gotten better. But then there was a time when I realized I'm giving all this energy. But if I put all of this energy and focus on me, how much would my life grow and change? And all the energy that I gave away, those people, majority of them are not in my life anymore because either they didn't reciprocate or they did what they shouldn't have done. So then I realized, why am I giving all this energy, feeling drained, overwhelmed? For me, I would just sit and cry, and I didn't know why. because of the energy I was giving. I was draining myself out of
Yeah.
that vital energy. And I didn't know there were names for that.
Yeah. There are some very intelligent people who think about this very seriously, thankfully, and they've written some of their research down. And that just learning the distinction between the two, or somebody giving me permission to acknowledge that I can, it's perfectly okay. It's better if you are there, if you're present, but you don't have to be all the way there. Not all the time, anyway. It doesn't necessarily help anybody when you think about it.
Exactly.
You can be comforting without hitting the bottom.
Yeah, you don't have to feel those feelings. You can let them know you are there if they need anything from you with your presence. If they need to call, they can call you, but you don't need to. I would be like, oh my God, for that person. And I would feel literally same emotions. I would cry with them. I would be like, my heart would start beating fast as their heart would go. And I know that can be draining. So that part I get, and that's very hard. As a person who does not drink at all, I don't drink at all. But I'm curious of this. That's the decision I made when I was 14 because everyone was drinking around me as a teenager. Then I drank a few times. I didn't like how I felt. So I was like, this is not for me. I like being sober. Is there any positive influence that you saw alcohol has on people's lives? Because people drink anyways. And what gets about is only the negative influence that alcohol can have on your life. Have you seen any positive ones throughout your career?
Absolutely. I mean, when obviously moderation is important, and that's something that is often lost on young people. So yes, often our first experiences with alcohol are a little bit over the top, to put it mildly. But as a of course, celebratory mechanism, alcohol is always great for just bringing people together. One thing that folks in the fermentation community like to say is that koji, which is an agent of fermentation in Japan, koji builds community. And I think it's not just alcohol, it's the entire fermentation culture that is present in Japan that really does bring people together. Now, other things that I'm not making any health claims here necessarily, but there has been a little bit of research showing that especially sweet potato shochu that is made down in southern Kyushu has very, very high levels of resveratrol, which means that it's a blood clot thinning agent that's even more powerful than what has been seen in red wine. So again, in moderation, and moderation is actually a pretty small amount of alcohol, to be honest with you. It's a couple of drinks maximum per day, but it can have that type of, protective effect, I suppose. And then, of course, it's just positives. I guess if you're in business, then you're looking at the economy, and that also is a positive. But it's a massive part of, at least these spirits are a massive part of Japanese culinary culture, and they leverage the great umami builder in koji. So they're just delicious, and they're as Japanese as sushi and wasabi.
So it can connect people, as I hear you say, if you use moderation.
Moderation is key.
As with anything, even if I do sport, I do sports, I also do martial arts. And every time I go every day of week, I cannot walk and I wake up my whole body hurts. Moderation in anything that sports working out can be healthy. If it's out of balance, it can.
If you don't overdo it.
Damage you. So it's not only about the alcohol. Do you drink daily, or is it how big of a part of your life is alcohol?
Certainly an occupational hazard, I guess we can say, because when I'm in the US, for instance, on one of my tours, it will be, one of the things I have to do in the evening. Well, the day typically will be from late morning through service time, which will start usually around 5 p.m. or something. I'm visiting places and doing staff trainings. I'm doing educational seminars, guided tastings, just to educate people about this really huge part of Japanese culture that nobody's ever heard of outside of Japan. And then from service time, once the bars and the restaurants open, then I'm hitting accounts that have purchased products from us through our distributors. And I am visiting in order to talk to them about, just basically see what's coming, what they've got on the menu, what's going to be happening next, those sorts of things. Then, from when service starts, then I'm going in to talk to bartenders and just make connections, see if there's any way that I can support. And I'll probably hit 4 or 5 accounts per night. So to answer your question, at least when I'm on the road, it is quite a lot of drinking. It's at least a drink or two per stop, and try to go to bed at a reasonable hour. We have calls when I'm in the States that start at 7:30 a.m., as I said before. So there's plenty of reasons to not overdo it. But when I'm in Japan, thankfully, I have a lot more flexibility, no account visits, which means that I don't have to be ordering drinks. And I do what's called kyukanbi in Japanese, which means dry liver day. And I try to add dry liver days to my week and work them into my routine. Now another occupational hazard is that people just send me alcohol all the time. So it just appears at my door. I just get samples constantly. Like, here's a couple of samples of product that I need to try and give feedback on and see if there's anything we can work with in here. Happens 3 or 4 times a week. Sometimes they're small bottles like this, which I appreciate, but sometimes they're normal size bottles, which drives me nuts. I do not need that much of a sample. Anyway, so there will be times, even when I'm not technically drinking, where I'm still sampling stuff and taking notes and sending them on. And, it's just first world problems, I'm sure everybody's going to think when they hear that. But I've got at least 700 different brands of Japanese alcohol in this room with me, more in the closets out there. There's a lot to go around. So if you ever do decide to start drinking, I can help you out.
Because someone has a worse life than you, I'm using quotation mark, doesn't mean that you are not going through your own challenges. You're going, like, your business, even like drinking and trying all these samples and making notes can be so tiring, and looking into different time zones. I feel like you guys from like American people, because I live there, are so politically correct and everyone is so nice always, but like everyone has problems, and I don't think it's okay for people to look at someone who's having an okay life and they're like, oh, your problem is nothing because look at me, I'm having worse problems. No, everyone's problem is valid. Challenges is valid. Then sleeping at 5 a.m. and then waking up again and then working in 2 different times or 2 different cultures, then you switch. I feel like you even switch up the way you talk to people. Then you come home and then you have to spend some time with yourself. It's hard. It is hard. It can be rewarding, like parenting. It's rewarding. I have a son. I get tired. And sometimes I don't want to be with my child because I just need to hear my own thoughts. Because children so much, and as much as I love, he's the smartest child I've ever seen. Sometimes I need to know what am I even feeling and thinking. So having a business is like having a child, I think, and then managing all those little
Yes.
things. So job that you are not only in 1 time zone, in 2 time zone, doing all of that. I could go on talking about this, and from your experience, I'm pretty sure you are very passionate about talking this, and we have not even touched the topic fully, not even like. If people are curious more about Japanese culture, the beverages, and what you do, where can people find you? And how they can connect to you?
Thank you. I'm very, very easy to track down online. I think one of the best ways to see what I'm up to is to check me out on Instagram. It's just my full name, Christopher Pellegrini. And I also have a website called ChristopherPellegrini.com where I upload articles that are trying to explain the basics of Japanese spirits and how they are different from everything else that you've tried in the world. The other way to track me down, I do post on Facebook occasionally. I know I'm sounding very old when I say that, but I do have a page there that I update. I'm not yet on the other ones, TikTok and the other stuff yet. I'm learning. I'm trying to figure out the culture over there before I barge in, but eventually I'll get over there, I think. But those are the best ways to find me. My business in the US is called Honkaku Spirits, Honkaku Spirits. And that's where you can also learn a lot more about Japanese indigenous spirits, the kinds that you drink. And I guess that's it. That's me. I'm very easy to find, and I am very responsive online. So if you reach out, I'll probably say hi.
Yes, please reach out, open the show notes. Those links are right there. Before I ask you my last 2 questions. Okay, you had to choose one place to live. Would you live in US or Japan?
I would probably live in Japan.
Because as I told you, Japan is in my and my son's bucket list, and I'm excited to go there wherever it will be. So I was curious for you to hear your answer. Is there anything, before I ask you my last question, is there anything you want to add to this conversation to make it feel more complete?
I, I guess it's just it's kind of a request for everybody who's listening to look up what Shochu is, Shochu, and see where that takes you. Do you have any that's available nearby you? Check it out. Is there a bar that has it in cocktails? Definitely go order one and start the journey. It's the craziest thing that nobody's ever heard of. There's more shochu consumed in Japan every year than sake. It's
That was my
Japan's
question,
best
actually.
kept secret.
I didn't, when I read that, I was like, really? Because I only know sake. And I was like, wow, no, that's pretty
Yeah,
popular. It's more
it's
consumed
huge.
and people should definitely check it out. This is a question I finish every episode with. And
Okay.
I want you to leave me and the listeners. It can be a quote, or maybe a request as you just made, something that is really in your heart right now and you feel guided to live with this.
I think for me, I'm always looking for people that I call keepers. And my goal is always to find one keeper every year, a person that I'm going to hold on to for the rest of my life, somebody who really motivates me and teaches me, helps me to become a better version of myself. And I've thought about the keepers in my life. And one thing that makes them keepers is that they're givers. They're genuine, they're present, they are part of, they're always there. And that's how I try to be myself. And I'm still learning how to be better. But I think if we can all just be a little bit more of a giver and then become somebody else's keeper, I don't think there's a better way to live your life.
Make me cry now. Those people are so important in our lives. And often people don't appreciate them because they are always there. And they are always there because they make sure that they are there because you are important for them. Not because they don't have anything to do, because they will. Maybe they are on a run and you call them and they will come to you because you need them. It's not that they are always available for you. So it's good that you see the importance of those people in your life and you appreciate them and you keep them and you do the same for them because always they get the appreciation that they deserve.
That's true. Very true.
So if you have a keeper, please, because they are always there, don't lose the interest in them because so many people chase toxic relationships, friendships, whatever it is. So those safe people will be always there for you because they prioritize you. That's just wanted to add that. Thank you so much for being an amazing guest. And I
Thanks for having me on.
loved your background. If people are watching and just listening, go and watch this because it's such a, I don't know, I feel like you are in your space right now and it made even special this conversation. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
For listeners, have an amazing day or night because we talked about time differences, the time zones, whenever you're listening, and until next time.